following podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca. Like what you hear? Want more of it ad-free, uncensored, and earlier? Sign up today at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca and start getting more for as little as $2 a month.
Time circuits on. Going back. Uploading hosts. Obtaining data on the best and worst of professional wrestling. Synchronizing hosts. Welcome to Wrestling with History.
Hello, folks. It's at Adam Conta along with Jesse Redden, and this is Wrestling with History episode 67. Yes, hello, Jesse. Wow, you're unusually enthusiastic at the start of the episode.
Oh well, I'm a little off today, so we're just having fun. We've got a lot to talk about, and if you weren't listening, well, you didn't hear what we had to say about the 21st, 2 days ago, when this show dropped, well, not this show, another show for the paying people. Yes.
We actually had a lot of fun. We talked about Irish Native Americans. We talked about WCW bombing in Philadelphia. We talked about
Boulder.
And Bulk Boulder. So if you want to hear us talk about all that stuff, there's still time. There's still chance. There's still hope. Just head over to patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca, and there you can get a full extended edition of this episode and all of our episodes that we put out there, as well as early access and some other benefits as well, for just a few ducats in the bucket every single month. We'd also like to encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. It goes out weekly, and you can enter our cool contest where you can win floor seats to Chinlock Wrestling House of Hardcore's Chinlock 5 event on June the 15th. It's a completely free newsletter. Just sign up now over at WrestleMedia.ca. And while you're there, you can click the links and like and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're on social media, so go out and interact with us. If you got a question for us, maybe there's a specific date in history you want Jesse and I to cover or talk about, or maybe you have an answer to you. Oh, okay. You're putting your foot down on that. You just don't want to take requests from listeners?
No, we don't take we don't take date requests. Okay, my dates are solid. Darn it.
Jesse's all booked up.
They can request to take me out on a dinner date. That I will not say no to, but
there you go. We appreciate that. Thank you. Maybe the dates that they're interested in are Saturday, June 15th. That's when WrestleMedia will be at the Chinlock Wrestling and House of Hardcore event, which includes the Chinlock 5 show in the evening, but also the Legends Convention at the Leon Center in Kingston, Ontario, featuring all kinds of greats in history like Bret the Hitman Hart, the Brainbusters, Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, Mark Henry, Billy Gunn, Jimmy Hart, Tugboat, Swoggle, Jimmy Corderas, Tommy Dreamer, and who knows who else is going to be there, except for us. We know who's going to be there. Us, WrestleMedia. We're going to be there, and it's going to be a ton of fun. Of course, we're also on the road. Saturday, June 29th, we'll be a part of Queen Street Entertainment's live pro wrestling event in Renfrew, featuring Tabernacle de Team versus the NBA, which stands for something I'm not allowed to say on this family-friendly programming, but I can tell you who makes up the team. MVP, that's not Montel Vontavious Porter. Oh, actually, no, it is not. It's Michael Von Payton and Raheem Ali, a couple of guys that you and I are actually both familiar with.
Yep.
Actually, Raheem Ali, fun fact for a lot of people who do not know this, Raheem Ali was involved in one of the first matches that you and I got to work together.
That's correct. In Kingston, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
The day I gave you my cane.
That's right. It was a dawning of a new era, or what was supposed to be. And then, like most things in my life, I couldn't follow through. So it was a little bit of a sad day for everybody involved, but especially for you. A very big disappointing day with your nephew.
I can never be disappointed in my nephew.
You're very sweet, Jesse. So look for us there for that incredible tag match at the Queen Street Entertainment Live Pro Wrestling event. Jesse, now that the shilling is out of the way, are you ready to talk a little bit about some history?
Oh, I guess we have to do that, right? That's kind of what the show's all about.
It's a big part of it, yeah. All right, I'll fire up those time circuits, and here we go. First, we're going back to 1993. WCW presented Slamboree, a Legends reunion from the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, the Omni, for those of you who don't know, holds a lot of people, probably around 40,000 or so. Well, on this night, they were able to fill up 7,200 seats of that 40,000. 100,000 homes were watching on pay-per-view, but that's not exactly good news, as that number is down from the May 1992 event from last year, Wrestle War 1992. Now, there were a lot of different matches on the show, but the thing that I want to talk about most of all is the Four Horsemen reformation. It wasn't a reunion, because this was a new Horseman, the Horseman for a new era, for the 90s, consisting of Ric Flair, Ole and Arn Anderson, and Paul Roma, whom many consider to be the worst Horseman in history. Jesse, how big of a Horseman fan are you? Like, are you a big fan of their work, or you just
no,
kind
not
of
at all. The reason we started this whole show way back in the day was because I didn't watch WCW. And
sure, but you might have been familiar with their history and whatnot. No, not at all. Okay,
not at all. I knew of Ric Flair. I knew of Arn Anderson. But the only time I really got to see a lot of their early work was there watching the beginnings of Nitro way back in the early days of this Wrestling with History program. So, yeah, I couldn't even tell you how many people were part of the Four Horsemen. I assumed there was more than four because they keep changing. But
well, let me set the stage for you. 1993, Ric Flair, obviously still Ric Flair, still doing great, just coming back from the WWF. Arn Anderson, again, same thing, still a guy working in his prime. So Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, awesome. It's the other two members that some people had a bit of a problem with. Now, Ole Anderson is one of the original members of the Four Horsemen, so a lot of people thought it was great. However, Ole was getting up there in age and was kind of seen as more of a mouthpiece for the group. He wasn't exactly...
Isn't Ole coming to Kingston?
No, Arn is coming to Kingston along with Tully Blanchard, who was also a Four Horseman, but when Arn and Tully teamed up in the WWF, they were known as the Brainbusters. You're probably more familiar with them than you are with the Four Horsemen.
No. I'm sorry. I'm trying to give you some answers here, but no, I don't even know who the Brainbusters or the Brainwashers are.
It's not the Brainwashers, it's the Brainbusters.
Oh.
My goodness.
Well, I didn't even know of the tag team before you mentioned it there a couple of minutes ago, so... But I don't want my brain washed.
Well, nobody does. I don't think anybody goes out with that intention.
I don't want my brain busted either. That sounds like it would hurt. And I'm too fat for brain busters. That would break my sternum.
I don't know, man. Mark Henry's there. I bet you he could get you up for a brain buster.
I don't want to take that bet. I'm sure he's the world's strongest man, but I'm also the world's fattest, and I don't need to wear brown pants to stop me from pooping.
Oh my God. I'm going to move on because I think we've officially crossed the line of good taste here. Please.
Well, I would be afraid. If he were to pick me up in the air like that, I would probably manure myself. Also,
gonna start using manuring as a verb, as an actual verb in my my daily vernacular.
It's
manure it all over that.
It's a good word, and it stays away from actually swearing. I've known with working with children that you have to try and watch what you say, so they still get the hidden meaning behind it because they're young adults, but then I'm not really actually swearing at them. So,
okay, that's fair. Okay, I will concede to that point for sure. But yes, Paul Roma. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go. I've done enough. But no, I don't know who Ole Anderson is. It just sounds. Okay. He sounds like a one of the people that ran the circus.
Barnum and Bailey?
No.
Ringmaster.
I don't know what the word I was looking for. Ole Anderson sounds like the guy that runs the 3-ring circus.
Yeah, well, that would either you're referring to P.T. Barnum as one half of Barnum and Bailey, who were the owner and operators of the Barnum and Bailey circus, or you're referring to the ringmaster, as in the person, the job, which was to control
there's got to be another circus Well, who had the 3-ring circus?
I was Barnum and Bailey. That was their thing.
No, there's somebody else. There
Hey,
has to be somebody else because that does not sound right.
I mean, there was the Shriners Circus. Is that what you're referring to?
That's the little guys on the car?
Yes.
Maybe.
Oh my God. Now I'm just picturing Ole Anderson in one of those little carts with a fez on it.
See, that's what it sounds like. Ole Anderson.
And I will say this would have been way more entertaining than what we got on this pay-per-view night. So,
well, I just find it hard to believe that there was 40,000 people and they only had 7,200 fans. And this is 2 days after the show that happened on the Patreon show, where they had one of the lowest recorded attendances ever.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. As was Paul Roma. Boy, I don't know whose decision it was to make him a horseman, but it did not go over with anybody involved. So
why? I don't understand. I don't know who Paul Roma is.
So Paul Roma was a young, good-looking wrestler. I mean, we certainly had some upside to him. Primarily worked in tag teams. Most people remember him as one half of Power and Glory, which was him and Hercules back in the late 80s / early 90s WWF. Maybe you would have remembered him as, I think he was one half of the Young Stallions at one point. He later went on to team up with Paul Orndorff in WCW, and they were known as Pretty Wonderful, which was an okay tag team. They actually worked pretty well, but
they should have been the Pauls.
The Pauls, yeah. But I think here the idea was, well, Roma's a young, arrogant up-and-comer. He would fit in with the Horsemen. But more than that, I think it was just, well, the Horsemen will pop a rating, so let's just put the Horsemen out there, and it doesn't really matter who we put with them. Now, ironically, Sid Vicious would also make his return to the company on this night, and by the end of the year, Sid was a member of the Four Horsemen, along with Ric Flair and, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and Barry Windham. So they would end up becoming a much more formidable. Yeah, exactly. It's amazing to me that you don't know who the Brainbusters are, but you know the stalker Barry Windham.
And I know TL Hopper and the Repo Man.
Oh my God. The fact that you know the Repo Man, but you don't know the Brainbusters makes me so incredibly sad. You have no idea.
Let's move on and see what happens in 6 more years past this.
Oh boy. Hey, this is a commercial for patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca, where you can get early access to episodes of your favorite WrestleMedia shows, get full uncut and uncensored versions of your favorite shows, and more. Don't want to hear this commercial on your podcast anymore? Sign up at our main event tier and get these episodes ad-free. Want to hear your own commercial here instead of ours? We've got tiers for that too. Visit patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca and join the WrestleMedia revolution today. Okay, now in all seriousness, we're having some fun here and we're talking about things going from bad to worse, but in this case, it actually is true because this marks the 20th anniversary of Over the Edge, the WWF pay-per-view from the Kemper Arena in Kansas City. 16,000 people in attendance with 416,000 people watching at home, which was more than double of the show prior, the year prior, with 211,000 homes. Now that's the good news. But unfortunately the sad news is that everything else is going to be terrible because, well, there was some good stuff on the show. Of course, it's most remembered for the tragic death of Owen Hart. He was scheduled to face the Godfather for the Intercontinental Championship, and at the age of 34, the same age that I am currently, he was lowered, or was supposed to be lowered from the rafters. The release mechanism on his harness activated early and fell close to 80 feet to his death. And despite the accident, the show went on. Decision that many have debated to this day. The death was acknowledged to home viewers. Jim Ross had to make the announcement after Owen had been taken to the hospital. Those in the audience didn't know, and the Hart family would later file a wrongful death lawsuit and would eventually settle with WWF out of court. The World Wrestling Federation would successfully sue the company that manufactured the harness later on. And the only known footage of the fall sits in the WWE's video library with specific instructions to not watch, copy, or distribute. The fall, thank goodness, was not on pay-per-view. A pre-match vignette was airing at the time, advertising the Godfather Owen Hart match. Now, regarding the event itself, Over the Edge has never been released on home video in any form. The first commercial release of the event, if you want to call it that, would have been the day that the WWE Network launched. So that's really the only place you can watch it, unless you were like me and you had a taped copy of the actual pay-per-view. All references to Owen Hart have been removed from the broadcast. The events of the evening are mentioned prior to the beginning of the pay-per-view with a tribute graphic. There's a lot to break down here. So we actually talked not long ago about
last week.
This night. Yeah, because we had mentioned that WCW's Slamboree pay-per-view a year later had done an angle where Mike Awesome threw Canyon off a cage and sent him crashing through the stage, which we both agreed was in terrible taste.
Yes.
And so we've already talked about where we were when it happened, but there's a few other things here that we didn't really go into detail about that I think we can talk about here. First, I want to ask about the decision to keep the show going after it had been announced that Owen Hart had passed away, because Owen's match with the Godfather, if I'm not mistaken, was third or fourth on the card. It was very early on in the show, but I think that Owen's death wasn't announced to the pay-per-view audience until much later, and I believe there was only 1 or 2 matches left in the show.
But it was never told to the people that were live in attendance either.
That's right. Only the people watching on pay-per-view knew about it. So what do you think was the right call? To go on?
Well, they always say the show must go on, right? And it's hard. It's hard to say because you never want to value someone's life over entertainment, right? And
absolutely.
You can't put a value on something like that. And for it to go on the way it went on, you could sit back and say Owen would have wanted it that way. He wouldn't have wanted it to be, stopped and ended right then and there. But really, it's hard. It's hard to say whether it should have went on or not. There isn't anything you can do about it. That's a lot of money to have to refund because people are going to demand refunds. And it's hard. It's for a business aspect, I suppose it was okay. But from a personal standpoint, that's a hard judgment call to make. I'm glad I wouldn't have to be the one to make that.
I agree 100%. It is tough, I think, because unless you've been in a situation like that, it's very hard to it's also very hard to say what you would have done. I mean, there may be some people out there who have such a strong conviction they said that they say that would have never crossed my mind to keep going. But I will say this. In times of great stress and duress, oftentimes some people cope by just continuing to push through. And perhaps the thought was at the time, this is a terrible thing that has happened. Let's just get through tonight, and then we will deal with this as soon as we can.
Right.
I mean, like you said, there wasn't anything that they could do at that time. They did everything that they could have done earlier. When Owen fell, they took him to the hospital. They got him immediate care. And of course, at the time, they didn't know the severity. They probably had an assumption, but they didn't know.
No, exactly. And until it was said by the doctor and confirming what their thoughts were, you're already halfway through the show by then. And
yeah.
So
it's a tough call. There's no question about it. I don't begrudge them for it, only because it is such a, first of all, what an incredibly unique situation.
And it would have been
like
harder.
Nothing like this had ever happened before.
No, and it would have been harder on the performers, the wrestlers. That would have been the hardest part, would be for them that have to continue after finding out the information that they found out that Owen passed. And then you have to still go out there and have 3 matches or 4 matches still on the show. It would have been harder for them to, more so than anyone else.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how many of the performers knew. I know that the crowd didn't know. Like, it wasn't announced to the crowd, which was weird to me because I know that a lot of people have a sticking point about that. They feel like the crowd should have been told that. But I don't think I would have done that. If they had given me the decision, I would have not announced that to the crowd at all.
No, not at all.
Unless they were stopping the show.
Yeah. If they were to stop the show, they said there was a fatal accident that happened. Would everyone we apologize. Please gather your things. Keep your ticket stubs and we can give you a refund or whatnot. Or, nowadays they would set up and have a grief hotline or counsel line or whatnot that you can call for witnessing such an atrocity.
Yeah. And you know what? I never thought of that, but you're right. I never really thought about the fact that people in that audience might have honestly been traumatized by that kind of situation. I never really had thought about that before, but you bring up a really good point. It's a tough call no matter how you slice it, but I think that when you have a situation like that is so serious and so impactful.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, quite literally. You've never had it before. There's really no protocol for something like that. So you just kind of have to make a judgment decision. And like you said, in most forms of entertainment, the motto has been, well, the show must go on. And if that's really all you have to go on in a moment of high stress and panic, then sometimes you make mistakes, but those are the calls you make and you have to live with them. Whether it was the right call or not, I mean, I think that's a very personal
it's to each person's opinion, because realistically, they like you said, they did everything they possibly could. It's not like they just left him there in the corner and kept going.
No, right? You're right.
They got him medical attention. They got him to the hospital. They did exactly what they could due to the accident that happened. And to the best of their ability, they passed it off to the doctors, and they kept the show going because for all they knew, he was, going to be fine, and the show would keep rolling along, and then it would just be another accident that happened, and we'd talk about it and laugh about it the next day. But unfortunately, that just wasn't the case this time around.
It was a real shame. I actually had a copy of the pay-per-view that was recorded straight off the television. And clearly, I mean, it wouldn't be worth anything except to maybe some hardcore collectors, but it's kind of haunting to know that I had something in my possession that will never be publicly kind of screened ever again. Not in a... Again, I'm not thrilled about having that, but I am kind of...
Well, it's a piece of history.
Well, that's it, right? This idea of like, wow, this is, what it was like. And I'll be honest with you, it's not something that I go back and watch over and over again.
Well, I hope not. It would kind of make you very morbid.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure there's people out there that do, right? So.
Well, I mean, again, it's certainly a fascinating piece of history for sure. And that's what we're all about. But it certainly is, something that when you look back on it, it does make you appreciate the time that you have here now, especially when, when you're a guy like me who was the same age as Owen Hart when he passed away. When I do think about it, it makes me go, wow, boy, oh boy, I better appreciate the time I have here. So
I know. I'm older than he is. I'm older than Owen will ever. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So I guess in one way, the lesson to take away from it is just, value what you've got today, people, because you never know when it's going to be taken away from you. Okay.
Now I have to go hug my mama.
Yes. But before we get to the hugging, let's talk
Somebody call my mama.
We're going to talk about some quitters, Jesse. Starting in 2006. Yeah, quitters. Bunch of quitters. In 2006, John Bradshaw Layfield had a pretty bad night. It started off with a loss to Bobby Lashley, where the Almighty, as he's now known, defeated JBL in just 82 seconds to win the WWE United States Championship. Now, that would have been bad enough. But moments later, Rey Mysterio also defeated JBL to retain his World Heavyweight Championship, and as a result of the loss, Layfield retired. And that was the last we would ever see of JBL. Except it wasn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, it wasn't.
Layfield was back in the ring about 18 months later, so I guess it was really just more of a loser
Time
takes
off.
a break. Yeah, loser takes a break match, which he did and came back and had a couple of pretty good matches, including his actual retirement match, which he would have against Rey Mysterio at WrestleMania 25. He would defeat Layfield in just 21 seconds this time, and also for the Intercontinental Championship. After the match, of course, JBL would go on a big rant and say, I quit. So there you have it. Bad night for JBL on May 21st of 2006, I should say. And then if we forward 4 years later, WWE presented Over the Limit from the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan. About 11,000 people were in attendance, with 197,000 homes watching the pay-per-view, which was down from about 228,000 homes for Judgment Day 2009. And in the main event of that match was the I Quit contest between WWE champion John Cena and Batista. Batista would lose that match, and then the very next night he would quit the company and would not return until January of 2014, in which he would be booed mercilessly by the WWE crowd at the Royal Rumble.
Yes, he was. Drax was not appreciated.
No, he certainly wasn't. I've always believed that if Batista had come back after Guardians of the Galaxy had been released, that he would have been a huge baby face. He would have been
probably
over. So there you have it. A bunch of quitters to end our show today. Do you remember either of those? Those retirements
I remember.
or quitting?
I'm pretty sure that the I Quit from Batista, that's the one when he's in a wheelchair, right?
Yes.
Like he's all beaten up and he's got like a head wrap and his glasses and his arm in a sling and he's in a
cast
wheelchair.
On his leg.
Yeah, and he's like, I quit! And he just throws the microphone to the bottom of it bounces off the ring apron, comes back up and hits him in the face.
I don't remember that happening, but
I think it happened. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it did. But yeah, I remember that part when he was whining and crying and he quit. As for JBL, I do not remember him retiring.
Well, either way, it was kind of fun. Both of those moments were a lot of fun, and I'm glad we got to end things on a
well. See,
I always
liked JBL. I don't know what it was about him, but I liked him. I think it was the rich person attitude that he played.
Did you find it relatable?
Yeah, well, let's just say his stance against immigration we had some same views on.
The policies of Sportopia were very similar to what JBL was promoting, I see.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that we had the white is right movement at one point. And
okay, we're good here. That's enough.
No. His name was Tim White, and we were all in support of his refereeing ability.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Why do people not believe me when I say that?
Well, because I think they're probably think that you're referring to Kerwin White. And then that makes them a little uncomfortable because of how racist and awful that gimmick was.
Wasn't that the Beaver Cleavage guy?
No, that was Beaver Cleavage. Kerwin White was a gimmick that Chavo Guerrero did for a very short period of time, in which he was like riding to the ring in a golf cart with Dolph Ziggler. Except Dolph Ziggler
as his caddy.
Was his caddy, Nick Nemeth. Yeah, exactly. And that was his catchphrase, was like, if it ain't white, it ain't right. And it was like, oh my God.
I gotta go back and watch me some Kerwin.
No. Well, you do that. In the meantime, I'm going to thank our listeners for tuning in this week. And don't forget, if you want more of Jesse and I talking about some of the ridiculous things that happened just 2 days ago, you can go ahead and sign up at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca, where you can get all kinds of extras for just a few ducats in the bucket each and every single month. We also encourage you to sign up for our newsletter or one of our social media accounts, or if you just want to drop us a line and let us know what's going on in your world, or if you have an answer to our questions, please go ahead and contact us. You can find all of those details over at WrestleMedia.ca. Jesse, in the meantime, thanks for being on the show. I cannot wait until we're looking at history next week, which will be the 28th for our patrons and the 30th for our listeners who are taking in the show for free at WrestleMedia.ca.
Those cockamamie non-ducats and bucket people. That's what I said. Anyway, yes, looking forward to it. I love how you thanked me for being on my show, but yeah. Listen, with the way things go around here sometimes, it's appreciated when you show up to your own show. I've only missed like 3 episodes.
No, I know that, but I'm saying with the way things go around here at WrestleMedia.
We thank you all. We will see you again next week. And remember, until then, that's history.
Time circuits overload. Begin podcast self-destruct sequence.
1, 2, 3.
This has been a presentation of WrestleMedia, where everything is wrestling and wrestling is everything.
Here's what you're missing out on right now over at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca. So I don't know if they had a case or not. Clearly they never went to court, so we never found out. Do you think this was an idea of like post serials were like, oh, you know what? We're probably in the wrong here. Here's the money. Or were they probably just like, we don't have time for this, and we don't want to spend all this money going to court. Let's just give Hulk whatever he wants to get him to shut up.
They probably signed a contract with him and had him actually stay as one of the serial things, commercials, whatever I'm looking for a word that's not coming to me.
We really need Drew Ferris on this episode, because if there's anybody that knows serial mascots in wrestling, it's him. Want more? Sign up now at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca.